Okay.
my picture. I can put my picture.
Okay, would you please call this meeting to order? Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, we recognize that we have a quorum. Public participation. If there's anything you'd like to say, please step up.
Good morning. My name's Tom Dembski. I'm from Linden Township. And back in June, I addressed this body. I spoke about the dark cloud that I was concerned about that seems to hang over this fire department, that I was very disturbed about it. I also told you all that I'd be watching and see how things went so I could learn. Well, I've been watching, and I've seen multiple instances where the chairman is taking unilateral actions. And I said, that's interesting. We have a board representative from all the groups, and the chair seems to do all the work. I checked the bylaws, I checked the articles of incorporation, and while the bylaws do mention that there's a CEO title attached to the chairman, there are no duties defined by that. So I've asked several board members, didn't really get any answers. So I asked the board, where are you at with that? I have some examples of these unilateral actions, and this is just in the last week or so. The administrative assistant for the CAFA has had her hours increased by about 50%, at significant cost, I'm sure, while the firefighters' shifts still remain open. In case people don't know, there's 3 shifts. Every 2 out of 3 days, there's only 2 firefighters on duty in Chelsea. I'm asking the board to restore those shifts to 3 firefighters per shift for public safety. My item 2 that I've noticed, this is the subject of this special meeting today, is to select an interim chief. Again, this appears to be a unilateral meeting and agenda driven by the chairman. And while there is a meeting, thank you, some parts of this process seem to clearly be missing. Number 1, the position, I found out, I've confirmed, has not been advertised, either internal or external, for an interim chief. I find that amazing for a publicly funded position. There's no known selection criteria that anybody seems to know of that I'm aware of on this board. No budgeted cost estimated, no real selection process established. I guess this is just a seat of the pants, grab a new interim chief that we like, and we go with it. So what I can gather is here's how the interim chief process apparently came down. An external candidate made himself known apparently to the chairman. So a special meeting, this meeting, was scheduled to interview, apparently, initially, this one candidate. Then, oops, an internal candidate who was interested found out about that. Internal, meaning the CAFA member now, employee, notified the board via an email, said, I'd like to be interviewed, I'd like to be considered. So they was told, go ahead and submit your resume. Again, nothing advertised. So, you know, I just have to wonder, as a taxpayer, to the casual observer, this really stinks of an underhanded, sneaky deal. No wonder there's such distrust on this. So I asked the board to please back up, cancel this selection process for today, advertise this temporary chief position. You could maybe do it for 10 days, internal. Internal would save a lot of money, by the way. And then establish an actual selection criteria, a process, just like normal government organizations would do, and interview questions, look at the pay scale, and then do this again in 2 weeks. I really think this could help restore some of the trust and broken relationships in this community. Thank you, folks.
Hello, I'm Suzanne Vandenbosch. I'm a resident of the City of Chelsea, and I'm on the Fire Chief Search Committee. I would like to remind the board that the CEO of CAFA are the community members that it serves. The community members that are supposed to be represented by the votes that you give at these meetings. And I would like to echo Tom Dembski's request to back this up and move forward with this process in the appropriate way and in a completely above board manner. This is our third misstep. We've had one search committee meeting, and this is our third misstep. We had the chair board handpick a union rep, which was illegal. We had to cancel our first meeting. We had to back that all up and do that the right way. We've had our meetings announced publicly that they would be public, then privately that they would be private, and we had to correct that misinformation. Now we have somebody being rushed through for an interim chief when no process has been followed. I don't think that's an option. I don't think that's fully representing the community members that you put your votes forward to, and they're watching. They're watching this process. An internal candidate would not only save money, it would provide stability while we move forward with our search process. And we're going to bring in a new fire chief. That's going to bring in off change. And our fire department deserves the best choice that we can make. Our community deserves the best choice that we can make in an interim chief. And an internal candidate, I believe, needs to at least be given a fair chance. And if it's illegal in any way that this process is moving forward without the position being advertised, that's a huge concern. And if you rush this decision, you're not only doing a disservice to the fire department and the community members, you're making our job as the search committee harder. And please don't do that. Thank you.
My name is Susie Catherman, and I've lived in this community for 16 years, and I had no idea this kind of stuff was going on. I just went day to day assuming that my house caught on fire, there wasn't going to be an issue, that there's going to be enough people to respond to my emergency. And I go to one meeting a week ago, or 2 weeks ago now, and I'm flabbergasted that my tax dollars are being just disregarded as a community member in the way that it's being handled. What's your rush? Because if you rush things, the big question is, what are you trying to hide? This should be done properly. There should be a search. You have someone internally, it's a seamless transition, and then you take your time to find somebody. So my question, and what the community is going to start asking, is what are you hiding, and why are you trying to rush it so much?
Anyone else? Okay, public participation is closed. Approval of the agenda. I need a motion to approve the agenda.
Motion to approve as submitted.
I'll second that.
Motion, second by Kurt. Discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Unfinished business, there's none. New business. Selection of an interim fire chief.
If I could say my piece first?
Certainly.
Okay. I went, after our last board meeting, I was sort of confused as to what the process was for an interim. I thought that we sort of said, Craig and you were gonna get us a name, make a recommendation back to the board, and we would consider that. And, you know, I'm fine with that. When I went back and reviewed the video, thanks for doing that. We started out with the agenda. We talked about having a transition, so we used the word transition. We were going to discuss it in the agenda under the new chief hiring committee, and when I went back and looked at all the discussion surrounding that, I think the new chief hiring committee said you weren't gonna deal with an interim position. So we sort of went from transition to now interim, and then I don't think we ever really closed the loop on what we were gonna do with an interim position. So when the email started going around, all the discussions started, you know, I jotted down a bunch of notes. You know, and the first thing, at times you mentioned, what is the process that we're gonna go through for finding an interim? And I sent Tom by email some of my, you know, things that I think we need to consider in this process. You know, what are the salary requirements? I did not consider going out for public. You know, what kind of contract are we gonna use for the interim? What are the responsibilities for the interim? And all these things that I'm listing, to me, seem to be things that the steering committee is starting out with. That's why, to me, it always made sense for this new chief committee to sort of have them deal with the interim. If we're not gonna, it sounds like we're not doing that. There is a rush to get an interim because I think we feel we need a fire chief, and our fire chief was no longer available as of Monday, August 1st?
No, end of August.
End of August?
Was what I.
So we've got,
Or immediately.
we've got 4 weeks to find someone. So my suggestion is that we define what the process is, and it sounds like there's a lot of support for doing that, you know, and we should discuss, you know, these issues, you know, and go through them one by one and define what is the process. Or do we have another committee that's gonna go out and follow this process and come back to the board and either a special meeting or another board meeting and make a recommendation? And then the board members can all say, did you follow the process? Did you do this, 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 this? This is the conclusion you came to. We as a board either approve that recommendation or, you know, send the interim committee back to to redo it. So that's my recommendation, is that we go through a process, identify the interim committee, and schedule is probably another thing that ought to be on there. We've got about 4 weeks to find an interim, unless we feel we can run without a chief, so, you know, anyway, that's my recommendation, is that we go through a process, and I'd be willing to list each one of these and, you know, go through them one by one. Or appoint a committee to do it, and I'll give you my notes, and the committee can work on those and either reject them or add more.
Sure. It was something that we actively discussed last Friday, the search committee, of whether we were going to take on the interim search or not. I think we decided at the time that we wanted to stay focused on finding the chief, but I mean, I'm hearing from a couple fellow committee members that they have very, very strong opinions about the interim search and the process, which are, I think, founded. We've got a committee already formed. We've got people with strong points of view about it. I heard a sense of urgency about engaging in the interim process. So I'd put it back on the search committee personally, and establish a process, and, you know, cover this. There's a few steps that need to be covered, not infinite, and there's public confidence involved, which is, we're in a deficit. We cannot afford to dig a bigger hole. So I would, you know, we've got a couple committee members here that spoke up. I think they're willing to take on some of that responsibility as part of the committee, and I think we can do it.
So you're saying put it back on the chief committee?
I'd say, you know, I mean, what's our alternative? Our real only viable, we have three. We could act in a hurry and destroy what remains, what doesn't remain of our public confidence in us. We could establish a new committee, which might be, it's gonna be hard to do. We've got a committee already established that at least has some foundation, one meeting. But I think opinions and ties in a broad base in the community, I think that'll work. If the rest, number one, that's my opinion. I don't speak for the committee. So it would be something that we'd have to put on that committee and have them elect to take it on.
Comment?
If it could be done in a timely manner, that was our greatest concern when Tom had called me and approached me about, volunteered me, I guess you would say, for a interim chief selection. My thoughts were we need to move very quickly. We need to have an interim on board probably within 2 weeks to have a couple-week transition period before the chief leaves. Familiarized with our operational capabilities and what have you. I would like to comment, it was my personal opinion, and Chris, if you want to throw the ball at me, you're more than welcome to. I was not in favor of selecting from within for a couple simple reasons. One being, we're shorthanded already. By promoting a shift captain into an interim chief position, you have now vacated another very valuable position, which we need, which in essence shorts you another firefighter. We are struggling very hard and only have an agreement with the union to put the rush on hiring one firefighter. Now, assuming that did transpire, look at what's going to happen. Let's say we promote internally. Now we take a lieutenant, make him acting captain. We are short a firefighter, now 2, until this new one is hired. And what happens when the chief selection committee comes about and says, here's our new chief? That all comes tumbling back downhill. Our shift captain goes back to being a shift captain, lieutenant back to lieutenant, and guess what? The one guy we just had to jump through hoops to hire in another state of emergency to get up to full staffing now has to be laid off after what period of time, because now we're overstaffed. My other comment to Tom was that given the current situation that we're in, I honestly felt that a fresh set of eyes from the outside would do the department a lot of good. Hopefully we're only talking 4 to a 6 month time frame, depending on the chief selection committee, how quickly we get resumes and things in for that. But I feel in that duration, the stability that we now have with the variety of shifts should be maintained, and an interim chief brought in from the outside to manage things for that short period of time. That being said, when Tom contacted me about this, he said, well, how are we going to do that? I said, well, what do we have currently, because it's no secret that the chief is leaving. Do we have any resumes already on board for the chief selection committee? He said, yes, we have 2. So, well, let's have a look at them. Both of them were pretty much equal in their educational requirements and needs, suitable for the job. One had ever so much less field experience, I will call it. So in a matter of haste, we said, well, how about this other resume that we have here? And let's bring that before the board. And that was our process, if you will, in doing that. I do apologize. We probably should have allowed my opinion or something to be noted, that I was not in favor of hiring from within, although you have ample qualifications for the job. My opinion, personally, is I feel we'd be shooting ourselves in the foot to do that at this point in time. That being said, Kurt has made some very good points, as have some of you folks, as to how you would choose to see a more formal process. I do still feel that haste is an issue, and it is a temporary position. I think if we put a qualified person in there as quickly as what we can, we will be miles ahead, and that gives some breathing room to the chief selection committee. My statement. Shaw?
No, I do agree with Kurt. Those are very good suggestions. I think it's something that should have been considered. And in haste, I can understand where perhaps that came from, trying to get somebody in place. I do think there's a benefit of having some continuity, given the past few years of all the ups and downs and upheaval that we've had. I do think that financially it makes sense to bring somebody within. Given that we have 3 shifts of 3, 2, and 2, we're already at a deficit of 2 firefighters, and I think in some ways it was short-sighted to only hire 1. So perhaps looking at revising the letter with the union, they were pretty reasonable a few weeks ago when we asked about that, maybe having another conversation about adding a 2nd firefighter. You know, talking with an internal candidate, if that's the choice, you know, perhaps they could go out on some of the major calls, given that most of the calls in this area are medical and probably don't require the same amount of people on the scene. That might be something that could be talked about as well. I know the chief was injured before I came part of the board, and I'm assuming that at that point there was nobody put in place to take his position from what I've been told, but the department had to get through somehow. They had to manage the day-to-day operations. And what about when he's on vacation? Who manages it then? So I think that given the criteria that's been mentioned, actually giving the idea of hastening the process, I think this could be handled pretty quickly, but in the correct manner, so that we can say to the public that this is being handled properly. And that would be what I would encourage that we do, is that we look at the process, we come up with some criteria, and we're here today. I mean, perhaps today would be a good time to talk about some criteria that we would be looking for. And then, you know, figure out how this is gonna give it back to the chief committee. I'm assuming, Peter, that you might be able to get a couple of meetings in. It may only take 1 or 2 to get this moving along. And you wouldn't be held to the same Open Meeting Act as we would. So some of this probably could be handled by conference call or even email to, you know, get some criteria in place. I mean, given that the meetings were gonna be private anyways, so that would be my suggestion.
I'd like to make a motion to have the new chief committee also be the committee in charge of selecting an interim chief, and that anybody that has comments, suggestions, are willing to send them to the chair of that committee, Mr.
Why,
Peter.
thank you.
Not the chairman.
I'll second that.
Discussion. That we recommend. The committee doesn't really have the authority to pick a chief. You're good with that.
And to make the recommendation back to the board within 1 week. Okay, 2.
Is the second good with that?
I'll second that amendment.
Discussion? Okay, now it's back to what I originally wanted.
Yeah, exactly. We've come full circle, thank you.
Come full circle.
Oh, we have a motion on the table. So are we still in discussion mode?
We're discussion mode.
I do want to say that hurrying's probably, from the outside looking in, not awesome. It's probably less than awesome. It's less than awesome being in a position where you feel like you might have to hurry. Behind every rock is not a villain. There's just people serving on committees, trying to do their best with imperfect information. Muddling our way through processes, trying to learn how to do this. I wasn't here 4 years ago. A lot of these guys weren't here 4 years ago, or if they were struggling then too. So I would just request a small amount of empathy when you're on the outside looking in, and also, if you have really, really strong opinions and a lot of energy on a subject, grab the rope. Anyway, that's all I got.
I'll just throw out the legal end of this, and that is that if you have a fire department, by law, you have to have a fire chief. If you don't have a fire department, you don't have to have a fire chief. The fire chief technically is in place until November. And although it's a great disservice to the department not to have the leadership in place, technically, legally, we have until November to make a selection. So, just to clear up the legal side of it. The motion on the floor to have the Fire Chief Selection Committee come back with a recommendation for interim fire chief. No other comment? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passed. Closed session's not needed. Final public comment.
Me again. Since I am on that committee, I'm willing to take that on, absolutely, no matter how much time it takes. Needs to be done. I'm a little uncomfortable, though, that we still don't have clear direction from this board to the committee. In my previous employment, we usually, when a committee was formed, there was usually something called a charter that's just a few lines on a piece of paper that says what we can do, what we can't do, what's expected, our outcomes. Could we get something like that from this board, please, for this committee? I mean, we don't even know the name. It keeps changing. You know, it's selection committee, it's search committee.
I'll offer to do that.
Okay, super. Thank you, Kurt.
Yeah, I was gonna say, if you didn't do it, we could do a draft ourselves and get it approved.
That's fine.
It'll be a draft. I've written
Yeah.
lots of charters. I'll give you a charter, and then it's a draft, and then you guys go where you want with it.
Great.
I just like to know real clearly what's expected from the people asking us to do something. And that would really help a lot. Could you please give us your thoughts on internal, external, advertising? I just think you're really leaving yourself liable if you do not advertise at least someplace. I mean, how do you know there's not another guy working in Chelsea Fire Department that's going to come out and say, wait a minute, I didn't know about this. I didn't get a chance to put my name in. Now you got a mess.
We already have a mess.
Well, you have a bigger mess. So that's what I was saying. Give us a charter, and I think I'm willing to do it. Okay, thank you.
Hi, me again. As a member of the search committee, I'll echo what Tom just said. I'm willing to do my best to try to fulfill an interim search as well. I agree that we need a charter. We need some sort of guidelines. We also very much need clear understanding on a genuine exit date for Mr. Payer. That would help not only with an interim search decisions, but fire chief search decisions. And I want to say, Mr. Meyer, absolutely, I think what you said was understandable. There's a sense of urgency here, and I want you to know that people appreciate that, but we also have to have a process in place, particularly because of the mess that we have. It's so important right now to follow every practical procedural step that we can to make sure that we have the community's confidence and the fire department's confidence. That the firefighters are the community. They're an integral part of our community, and the damage that's been done in the community and with the firefighters is extreme. It's one of the most extreme things I've ever seen. So the fact that we need to move forward very carefully, I hope, is impressed upon the board. And I would like to respectfully suggest that on another subject entirely, if a member of the public speaks during public comment and they have not made a joke, do not smirk or laugh after they've spoken. It's not going to help. No matter what you think of what they've just said, listen respectfully. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Meg Emla. I do not live in this district. I teach in this district, and so I kind of think about my students as my kids, and so I feel like I have an interest in this community and its safety and everything overall. But Mr. Feeney had said something about that you guys weren't exactly sure all the steps to take, or that you guys were learning how to do some of the search stuff. And maybe it's just because I'm a teacher that I think maybe there's a way to use some other organizations, other fire departments, or we just did a superintendent search this past year in this district. Maybe there's some other boards or other organizations that you guys could turn to and ask some members about what that process could look like. And again, I'm just saying, as a teacher, education, right? So go out and maybe find some of that stuff. So if that works for you guys, great.
If I might address it,
Yeah.
it's okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with you. If you're not the smart guy, you gotta go find the smart guy.
Oh, I wasn't.
Or lady. No.
Okay.
I mean that like respectfully.
Okay.
Chief Toth, the Chief Toth had a suggestion of somebody that they have used in the past.
Oh, great.
For facilitating or hiring. And that person's actually gonna be at the search committee's meeting tonight.
Great. Okay. So you guys have already done that.
It's a great suggestion.
It's a suggestion, but it sounds like you guys have already taken it. So I'm good. It's all good.
You're good.
Okay. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Carla Cobb. I live in the city. Just a question on how you think you're going to get a qualified chief for the interim for 4 to 6 months. If I'm looking for a job, I'm looking for long-term. I don't want to be an interim. If you hire from within, you've got somebody that knows the guys, you've got somebody that knows the day-to-day operations, and hopefully they've worked with the chief long enough that they know what they need to do. I don't see the reason to go outside. If you're going to hire an interim chief, hire from within. Make it known, this is where you're going to be. When we get a chief that comes in, it goes back down. You go back to being your position. We are down firefighters. I don't see why you would need to fire them. If you gave Mrs. Pear a raise, put her back down to where she was. Put her back down to 10 hours. Make the firefighters somebody that you're going to hire. Thanks.
Anyone else? Final public comment is closed. That brings you in.
Motion to adjourn, ma'am?
I'll second.
Discussion? All those in favor of adjourning, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Thank you very much.
And so you'll just be a draft.